trauma releasing exercises or tension releasing exercises by a guy developed by a guy, David Berceli, out of the US, who'd spent a lot of time in war zones and observed in mainly in kids. I think he originally discovered this, or sort of joined the dots. As there's sort of these shells, bombs going off and whatnot, the kids would shake and tremor. The men wouldn't. The kids don't end up with PTSD, the men would. And they say they're going into shock. Well, that whole theory, I think, is completely wrong. It's actually the body coming out of stress. And you start seeing these stories. There's parts of Africa where they won't let the mother go home after giving birth until she's tremored. Otherwise, she's likely to end up with postnatal depression. We're designed for this stuff. Humans are designed to heal, to handle stressful situations, handle traumatic experiences. And part of that design is being able to mobilize an enormous amount of energy to deal with that. And the other part of that design is being able to release that, what doesn't get used.
Welcome back to Health Alliance Australia. Health Alliance Australia is leading health advocacy dedicated to honouring bodily autonomy and well-informed health choices. My name is Jenny Rose Angewartha, and I will be your host today. Today, we welcome Mathew Goddard, and just for some background, Mathew and I are connected on LinkedIn, and he answered my call out for alternative healing modalities and has generously come today to share his incredible story of how stress impacted his body, manifesting a symptom so bad doctors thought he had a brain tumour. And this led him on a 12-month journey where he spent thousands on MRIs, CAT scans, ultrasounds, neurologists, psychologists, etc., to no avail. Like many of us who get to a certain point in mainstream medicine, he looked for alternatives and discovered a very simple protocol that helped him release stress trapped in the body in 3 weeks after a year of hell. Now, Mathew is also the CEO and founder of agriculture and agri-tech startup investing in sustainable production of seafood. He has a wealth of experience with qualifications in environmental science and management, business improvement leadership, Lean Six Sigma, economic development and business coaching. He is the Chief Operating Officer at The Village Co., whose mission is to do good locally, helping to partner with Aussie charities to raise money and awareness for mental health issues. So this is quite amazing that you are here today talking to us on how stress has impacted you physically. I actually have a friend who, his husband owns a naturopathic clinic in Melbourne. And a few years ago, I asked her, what was it? Well, what was the core ingredient that underpinned a whole host of chronic disease, from cancer to heart disease? What did she think, or what did her husband think? And she answered, and she said to me, it was stress. And I thought, wow, this is, quite profound, that stress could cause a whole lot of ailments. And when you wrote to me and you were telling me about your issues, and you were saying how I knew it was not a problem with my mind, but more coming from my body, I thought it was very interesting, because we often think of stress as something we can just think away. We know we're stressed, we'll just do a bit of yoga, a bit of breathing, and it'll all go away. And obviously you probably knew a lot of this kind of stuff already, but you actually had to go deeper into actually finding out where stress and trauma was stored in the body and how to release that in such a way that your body could retain balance again. So I thought we could just start with sharing about what happened, well, not what happened, but what symptoms you had and a bit of your journey.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Jenny. And it's not a story that I've shared publicly, really, or had the opportunity to share publicly, but it was one of the most challenging periods of life to date. And thankfully, once I sort of figured out what was going on, I was able to heal fairly quickly with the help of a few tools. But I guess I'd come through a fairly stressful period in my life, and I sort of, in hindsight now, look at it that potentially we've got some level of absorbing stress in the body, a threshold, if you like, and I was carrying a fair bit of stress already. with life's goings on. And then I had a particular traumatic experience that may have tipped me over the threshold, but it wasn't something I joined the dots with initially. I had no idea that I was carrying this stress. It was fairly unconscious to me, and even just the event that sort of maybe tipped me off over the edge. I thought I sort of handled it fairly well. Like I didn't feel like it was really overwhelming or anything like that. But really, the sort of signs that something wasn't right was started with stomach problems was where it started, and as I've learned more about trauma, of course, that makes a lot of sense. I sort of, when I explain it to people now, it's if you look at mammals. If they're under threat, the first thing they do is they empty their bowels. So they're digesting food. Yeah, digesting food is a very energy intensive operation of the body. And if you're in a stressful or a situation that there's threats, the body doesn't want to do that. It wants to conserve its energy for fighting, fleeing. And so at the time, I would eat and go straight to the toilet. And this went on for a little bit. Went to the doctors, like, something's not going on here. I'm going to the toilet four times a day, and we think you've got Giardia. Here's an antibiotic. That didn't resolve it, obviously. And then those symptoms sort of progressed, where I started having tinnitus, so constant ringing in the ears. Was having loss of balance. Dropping things. I'd be dropping my keys, or I'd pick a glass of water up and drop the glass, and insomnia. There was a period there I was slurring my speech as well, or that it felt to me internally like my speech wasn't marrying up.
Think you were having a stroke.
Yeah, I was, and and of course, when you're in this situation, and I can talk more about how the body reacts to stress, it then starts to compound, because you're thinking, well, hang on a second, I've got something wrong with me, and then you become more vigilant, and then there's like a negative feedback cycle where you start adding more stress into the situation, trying to resolve it. So this went on for a period of months, and normally I would have 3 or 4 of these symptoms at a time, and I'd start sleeping, and then something else would come up, and it was quite challenging, and also quite scary, really, because I felt fairly solid in life, but just there was something wrong going on with the body. And I was heading to the doctors trying to figure this out, and the doctors, and it's no criticism of the doctors, really. I felt like they had my best interest at heart, but just didn't have the tools in the toolkit. And I had also had bodily pain, so there was parts of my body that was having really strong pain, and so they started a series of ultrasounds and going, well, there's nothing actually wrong with that part of the body, we don't know what's going on, and neurologist appointments, balance assessments, nothing wrong. MRIs for brain tumors, CAT scans I had my lower back was just jacked up, and they thought maybe there's a bulging disc. Like, it was just one after another trying to eliminate it. Hey, maybe you should go and see a psychologist. I went and had a chat with them, and no avail. And I think even that model, but certainly for what I was working through, was just not aligned. And I found this tendency of the medical toolkit of going, well, let's analyze the mind. And I kept saying, well, my mind is pretty solid. Like it's in my body. It's somehow coming from my body. And it was a pretty hectic period of life. I found at one stage I had a headache every day for 3 months. Headaches were a big part of it. I'd wake up most mornings with like bloodshot red eyes, and what I've since worked out was just sheer tension in the body. And so I swam every morning at 5:30. As soon as the pool opened, I was in the pool doing laps, and to the point where my wife was in labour, and I even took her to the pool so I could do my laps, because that was the way I kept the wheels on the track pretty much. I found that loosened me up, and I could tackle the day after I'd done the 30 odd laps of a morning. And yeah, and I mean, and life, I don't think, thankfully I felt I was mentally strong enough to keep the wheels on the track. But, I found a lot of empathy and compassion for people who have dealt with this for an extended period of time. 12 months for me was really strong.
Hell, yeah.
I can imagine after 2 or 3 years of something like this, your resilience to continue to face up to life, it'd be a pretty hard slog. And I can see why often people who have stress or PTSD end up with mental health challenges and addiction issues, because it is really trying to numb yourself to what's going on. So thankfully, I had a pretty strong mind at the time, and was able to
you need that mind to actually search for answers, because without that, and without that hope that you're going to find the answers.
Yeah. And I
some
think
people can you could look at, if you Googled the internet, you'd start to wonder if you're dying or something, really.
Well, there was
all sorts of reasons that it could be, that you could blame it on, for example.
Well, that's really part of it. I was searching the internet and trying to figure it out. The doctors, that I wasn't getting the answers with the doctors, and something wasn't adding up. And of course, I'm going, well, maybe I've got cancer, maybe I've got a brain tumor, and you can find a place on the internet to confirm your theories with just about any symptom, right? So Google's not a great place to go when you're trying to figure out your health issues, but it also ironically saved me in a way.
Yeah.
But the one thing I learned about, what's termed PTSD as a collection of symptoms, I prefer to just call it trapped stress, really. I think that's all it is. PTSD sounds like very serious and very almost fatal in a way. This is what you've got. You've got it forever. And really, what I found was stress is a very natural thing to happen to us. It keeps us alive. It's a very handy tool that the body has. But if we're not able to release the stress or the energy that we mobilize to deal with stressful situations, that's when the challenges of this trapped stress and complications from stress can become super serious. So,
and when you think about it, like in this time that we're kind of living in right now, I mean, a lot of people are under a great deal of stress. I don't think we've probably all lived under the most uncertain times. And so a lot of the symptoms that people are experiencing could actually be simply a result of trapped stress, but they might be blaming it on all sorts of things that are unrelated. We could have valid points like shedding or other issues, but when it all comes down to it, I'm thinking it's very interesting what you're saying about the gut. It's like everything is related to the gut, and it starts all off there. And of course, you can have external factors impacting that as well.
Well, I think it all adds to this threshold, this sort of concept that I've found. This is how I reconcile it for myself, is that somewhere in each of us we've got a threshold of stress, and at any point in time, and modern life is adding more and more stresses in, and I think a lot of us are now hovering around that threshold or just over it, of what we can actually handle. And food's part of it, and our some lifestyle factors and all the rest of it. But certainly what I found through my journey and subsequently during healing myself and following healing myself, I found a deep interest in understanding what I was going through, and then sort of making that all fit into a model for myself. And there's the big, one of the big things in play is the vagus nerve, which connects the mind and the body. And I think predominantly, I think when most understand that the mind controls the body, and then the mind sends these messages down through the vagus nerve into the body. But there's been recent studies that show that most of the traffic, the communication traffic, actually comes from the body and back to the mind.
Wow.
And that is exactly what I experienced during this episode, where what I found and was my body was telling my mind constantly, 1,000 times a second, something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. And then the mind does what it does best and tries to figure it out. And so it starts to look at your whole life to figure out what's not right. And if it can't see anything, it just makes it up. So, and you hear of, PTSD from war veterans and things like this, where they start, seeing shadows, and that's this body, in my experience anyway, the body's constantly telling the mind something's not right. The mind is trying to figure it out, and will start to make up a situation or make something out of nothing to try and justify, hey, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And my mind was constantly searching for situations to go and then remedy, because it was getting told, endlessly from my body something's not right. And it stacks up with this theory that this evidence that shows the communication from the body to the mind is much more going that way than coming down from the mind. And the body has this, enormous intelligence, and I've sort of come to think that there's a lot of our intelligence is stored in our body, and the mind is sort of the processor of it all and filing it away. But it's either it's pulling its information from the body, and it makes sense,
interesting. Yeah, because I remember I spoke to a woman whose husband had a brain tumor. And so part of his brain is actually kind of died around near his ear there. And she went off, and they went off and relaxed near the ocean. And instead of staying in Melbourne, they went to Ocean Grove. And what she told me was that over time, the body rebuilt those neurons around the injury site. And I thought, well, how would the body do that if the brain is where all the instructions are? And as you're saying, it's like something is held within the actual cells of the body in order to rebuild the brain.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately our body is this massive sensory organ as well, and we're picking up cues from the environment and sensing from the environment, feeding that in, storing things away. And this was sort of, stacking up for me, as I was saying to the doctors, it doesn't feel like my mind. My mind's solid. It's my body. Something's going on with my body. And one of the sort of the sort of tipping points for me is I was actually building houses for homeless people at the time, and developing this housing model. And I actually just got overwhelmed by a number of homeless people at the time, which we couldn't help. And it was sort of maxed out my system, and I sort of broke down in a way, and I took a day off the next day, and body was jacked up. I didn't know what was going on, and I ended up going for a massage. And during laying on the table, I could actually feel my whole body, this fear and this vigilance in my body. And I was getting a massage, and I'm like, on edge, thinking something bad was going to happen, but having absolutely no logical reason for that thought. And I was sort of conscious and aware enough to be able to observe it and not get lost in it. And I sort of come home, and I said to my wife, I was like, yeah, something is not right. It's going on with me. And that was a bit of a turning point for me, is really trying to figure it out. And thankfully, one of the nights I wasn't sleeping, was sitting up. I was Googling the back channels and found somebody in the US, I think it was, on a blog post, had the exact same symptoms as me, and said, oh, there's this technique called TRE that helped me. And so I, went Googling and found this TRE, which was a technique referred to as trauma releasing exercises or tension releasing exercises by a guy developed by a guy, David Berceli, out of the US, who'd spent a lot of time in war zones and observed in mainly in kids. I think he originally discovered this, or sort of joined the dots, as there's sort of these shells, bombs going off and whatnot. The kids would shake and tremor. The men wouldn't. The kids don't end up with PTSD. The men would. And he thought there was something in this tremoring. And then, of course, you see it throughout the whole animal kingdom. I'm sure most people have seen their dog shaking when there's thunder. And you can get on YouTube and look at polar bears and antelopes who've been, there's a great one on YouTube of a lion cat or a leopard capturing a antelope, and then the antelope, the leopard gets scared away, and the antelope goes through this whole tremoring process, jumps up, shakes off, and doesn't go and suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, goes and joins the herd and back eating grass. And I think David Berceli was piecing all this together, and it's not something that he invented, tremoring. It's a natural part of our body, but it's the body's way of releasing stress and releasing trauma.
And we often think of tremors as something bad, right? In science. So if someone is having these episodes, we kind of think, oh, there's a problem, let's try and fix the tremor. As opposed to saying, oh, okay, that person is releasing built up stress, energy in the body.
And for me, it really resonated because at this point, there was 3 or 4 times I'd woken up at sort of 2 a.m. in the morning or something and shook in bed for like an hour. And it was quite scary at the time. I didn't realize what was going on.
Uncontrollably, you were shaking.
Uncontrollably shaking, yeah. And,
were you emotional at all, or just it was?
No, I mean nothing. And it was quite weird, but it didn't feel like it was anything, drastic going on. But it did rattle me. Like I'd wake up and I'm, shaking, and just shook for an hour or so in bed, and that was sort of earlier on in the piece. And then when I discovered this technique of TRE and started to join the dots with tremoring, and often, like you say, Jeannie, that we think of tremoring as something that's wrong and something that we need to stop. And that's, I think, part of the problem where we've disconnected ourselves from the body's natural healing modalities is, and you often see it, right, when someone has a car accident, they're sitting on the curb, shaking, and they're wrapping blankets around them, and they say they're going into shock. Well, that whole theory, I think, is completely wrong. It's actually the body coming out of stress. And you start seeing these stories. There's parts of Africa where they won't let the mother go home after giving birth until she's tremored. Otherwise, she's likely to end up with postnatal depression. And giving birth is a traumatic experience, a beautiful one, but a traumatic one for the body. And shaking and afterwards is part of it. And so I start seeing all these dots that are joining, and
even febrile convulsions. Sometimes. I mean, I've had a young one. My last one had some febrile convulsions, and I just knew instinctively. All I had to do was hold him, and he had a fever at the time. Keep his head cold, and everything would be fine. And he was, and he had. I think he had 3 in 24 hours. But I know that a normal parent would have just rushed off to hospital, and done a whole barrage of tests, and they would have come back and said, "Oh, it's nothing," because there was nothing to essentially find. But it's interesting what you're saying here, because it's when we're looking for answers in medicine or in our body, in our health, but the actual model that we have, when it's wrong, we can't really figure things out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me, it was just a process of rediscovering what was already natural, and I sort of come to see trauma, or if you're in a traumatic experience, we're designed for this stuff. Humans are designed to heal, to handle stressful situations, handle traumatic experiences. And part of that design is being able to mobilize an enormous amount of energy to deal with that. And the other part of that design is being able to release that, what doesn't get used. And there's a great book, I think it's called Awakening the Tiger. I can't recall the author at this
We can
stage.
put it in that. We can put in the links later.
Yeah, it's a great book on trauma. If anyone's suffering from trauma or PTSD or even just stress, I recommend reading it. But in that book, the author looks at a bus load of students who were kidnapped, and they were held in an underground bunker for a period of days. And there was 3 kids out of that mix, from memory, that spent those 3 or 4 days trying to escape. The rest, they were in an underground bunker, felt helpless, and sort of sat in the corner trying to wait it out. The 3 kids who tried to escape ended up not developing any health concerns throughout the rest of their life. The other 17, mostly from memory, developed autoimmune diseases, all sorts of other challenges later in life. And the theory was all of those 20 kids mobilized a massive amount of energy to deal with that stressful situation. Only 3 of them were using that energy and expelling that energy, trying to deal with it. The other 3, because it was a fairly helpless situation, the other 17, sorry, didn't use it. And I often think of, like, the stories of, maybe they're anecdotal, but of mothers lifting cars off babies and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is, in a traumatic situation, the body can draw an enormous amount of energy out of its cells and out of it, wherever it needs to pull it from, to deal with a threatening situation. Huge amount of energy. But if that's not released, that's where this trapped stress comes in. It's trapped energy, and our body's mechanism for releasing that is simply shaking. But we stop ourselves. We don't allow it. We're going into shock. Wrap ourselves in a blanket. Stop it. And it's this situation that we've lost connection with. It's a natural process. So, and so discovering this TRE technique, I found a guy in Victoria, Richmond Heath. He's the sort of lead guy in Australia who understands this technique, TRE. I recommend anybody who would like to explore TRE further to reach out to him. There is a network of people in Australia who can show you and teach you this technique. It's very simple. So, my story was, after seeing this, so I got in touch with Richmond, and he was holding a 2-day workshop in Sydney. And at this stage, I'd tried everything. I had pretty low expectations that this would be just another one of the things. And
so by trying everything, just be interesting for the audience to understand what do you mean by you tried everything other than?
Well, I tried most medical stuff. I'd also had previously sat a Vipassana meditation, which I didn't join the dots until afterwards. But Vipassana meditation, if anyone's not familiar with it, is a form of meditation which is bodily based. You essentially go into your body for 10 days. The proper Vipassana course is a 10-day silent, no eye contact, no reading, no writing. You pretty much meditate from 4:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night. It's pretty intense but it sits you with yourself. So I'd previously done that just as an exploration prior to this thing, and it's an amazing technique. And but again, it's bodily based. So you're scanning your body during meditation for physical sensations. And I now can use that. If I get a migraine or a headache, I can often, not always, but often go into a meditation where I just observe the pain or observe the migraine and not shy away from it. If that makes sense, go into the body and observe it. And often when you listen to it, it ends up over time releasing. So, these are the dots that were joining with me. I was trying some of that. I'd had met somebody who was talking about how they healed themselves from cancer and one of the techniques was humming or vibrational stuff. And so I was driving to work humming some mornings. I tried, to no avail on that front, but I'd tried most of the medical routes. Exercise seemed to help temporarily. That would, if I didn't swim in the morning, my headache would last all day. If I swam in the morning, I'd have a headache sort of through to 10 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. And again, I think this process of swimming just released enough tension out of my shoulders to give me some reprieve from the headaches. But at the time I went to this workshop, I'd had a headache and sort of bloodshot eyes every day for like 3 months. And I wouldn't take Panadol and Nurofen because it didn't help anyway. So I just sort of, and I kept saying to the doctors, I was fine. Now I'm not. I'm not interested in Band-Aids. I'm not to the point where I need a Band-Aid. I want to get better, So and that was sort of my attitude. I was relentless in a way of trying to find a solution. And so I went to this workshop, TRE workshop. Not really expecting anything. You go through some basic like yoga style stretches, very basic. And what you do is you sort of bring a level of exertion to your muscles. And I don't know if you've ever been to the gym and you come out and you sort of have a little tremor sometimes after your legs get a bit shaky if you've done a heap of squats. That's essentially what these basic yoga stretches are, just putting enough exertion in your body to start a little physical tremor, and then you lay down and you go through a process which brings those tremors on more, and your only job really is to keep your mind out of the way and allow the tremors to progress through your body. And so on this first day of this workshop, I'm there, I'm sort of not really sure what to expect. I do some things, I lay down and I tremor, and it's quite a weird sensation, to be honest. When you,
how long were you exercising before, doing these stretches before you got to the point of tremor?
It's like 15 minutes. This is a very basic sequence. And this is why I reached out to share this technique with you, because I don't think it's a silver bullet, but it's very, very accessible. And it doesn't cost anything once you know how to do it. So you can really do it yourself. Which is unlike many of the modalities which people are on offer, psychologists or whatever it may well be. You've got to keep going and you've got to keep paying, and it can be, if you're not well and you're trying to tackle the rest of life, it can be very expensive to try and get yourself healthy.
I mean, why not try it? I mean, you've got nothing really to lose.
Well, that was my thoughts. And so you go through a series, I think there might be 5 basic stretches, and then you lay down, and then there's a particular sequence to bring on these tremors. And it's quite weird when it first starts, because your body is involuntarily tremoring, shaking. I should preface that it's very easy to stop that though. You can take control back pretty easy. And it's more of a mental process just to say, right, I don't want to, straighten your legs out, you don't tremor. But your only job, as I always explain to people when I show them this, is to keep your mind out of the way and allow those tremors to progress and do what they want to do. And each time, often it's something different, because your body's, the way I think about it is your body's just knows exactly how to unwind this, and you're giving it 15 or 20 minutes at a time to just unwind a little bit more. The next day you get another 20 minutes and it unwinds that way and then this way. And so often part of the technique is, if you feel like your body wants to roll, just roll and let it shake in that way. And then so anyway, this first day of the workshop, I do 15 minutes of these stretches and then about 15 minutes of shaking. I was like, okay, that was weird, but I can I go home, slept in the hotel that night, ready for the next day, and I wake up the next morning and I don't have a headache for the first time in 3 months. And I go, wow, whoa, hang on, what's going on here? And that was the corner for me. That the next day I went and learned the rest of the technique, did some more tremoring, and then each night for about three or 4 weeks, I used it for a long time, but it took about 3 or 4 weeks to get me back to about 80% good to go. And I just would lay down. Often I would watch TV sometimes doing the tremors. Sometimes, when my wife and the kids go to bed, I'd turn the TV off, the lights off, and just fully let my body fully drop into my body and let it unwind. And I found those to be, a deeper release. But ultimately what you're allowing is your body which has stored all of this energy from mobilizing it during a stressful situation, to just release that energy in a tremor. And it has this amazing wisdom, the body, to know exactly what part to release next,
Yeah.
and next, and then next and next, and slowly unwind. And it's non-cathartic. So which I think is also quite a unique part of this, is that you're not reliving the trauma or the whatever you have stored in there. You're not actually, as you release it, not going back through that. You can actually get emotion, energy in motion, as I sort of say. You can get emotional at times. I haven't, but I've seen others with the technique have emotion release, but again, it's not that, there's no connection as to what that emotion was attached to, and so but often it's just a tremoring, and it is unbelievably relaxing. And what I found is that as I do the tremor, I would have the best night's sleep afterwards that I'd had in a long time. And so I would often do these before bed. I'd have a tremor on the 20 minutes, 30 minutes of shaking on the ground, go to bed and sleep like a baby. And over a period of sort of weeks, I got back to a fairly good state where I really turned a corner, and I was sort of good. And within about a month or two after that, a friend of mine referred me to another friend who did some somatic therapy, which is also, again, a body-based therapy. I think I went to 2 or 3 sessions with her, and feel into your body, what's the sense, and that was a releasing technique as well. And again, for anyone who's suffering trauma, any of these body-based therapies, somatic therapy, or Bowen therapy is another one. I've not tried Bowen therapy, but I know people who have had trauma have got a lot out of that. Any of these body-based therapies can yield some really good results. And for me, so I did some TRE, a couple of somatic therapy sessions, and I was good to go. I was 100%. And this happened relatively quickly after quite a, for me, 12 months and quite a strong period. Relatively quickly, I was good. I was back.
So how long have you been good for now?
That was years, probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5.
So all corrected. It's interesting when you're talking about this, because
I don't have any residual. I don't have any. I mean, I get work. It's stressful, but I don't have any residual issues at all. And again, it was my mind was fine. It was my body that was carrying this, and just through the process of releasing some tension out of the body, I found, I was back. I was exactly how I was describing it to the doctors. I was fine.
What you're talking about, how like the medical model of it is, if you've got trauma, to go relive it, to bring it out and extract it. And what you're saying here is that the body will actually naturally release it. And it reminds me, I actually had quite a traumatic, what you're talking about, traumatic experience in hospital. They gave me IV saline too quickly, put me into heart failure. I ended up in ICU, where I was literally tortured, and at one stage violated. And I tried to complain about it, but anyway, there was no recourse. And then afterwards, they tried to silence me by having child protection come to my door. But the interesting thing about what you're saying is that I actually had 2 experiences of these tremors that you're talking about naturally.
Yep.
And so I think, because
I don't have any, your body knew what to do.
Yeah, I don't think I actually had any. Like, I mean, a lot of people will have trauma from essentially being medically raped, but for me, I can talk about it to you, and I have no feeling. Like, it's something that happened. I knew what I had to do to protect my family, and my child at that time was to just keep the peace with what was going on, and just move on with my life, because this doctor was a bit of a psychopath. But in myself, I was able to move on because I was able to release it from the body, like what you're saying. It's really quite profound. Like, some people obviously have a natural, may just do it like I did, without even knowing that there was something to do, but to actually now to have the tools to say, oh, this is what we're actually aiming to do in a stressful situation. If you aren't able to achieve that natural, do you still do it?
Still do it. I still did it on the weekend. You know, and I just think for me, it's just a general self-care tool that just encourages your body to let go of a bit of tension. And you don't even have to have been through any traumatic situation, as you know, to accumulate stress in your body. We get stressed as soon, you know, I don't watch mainstream TV, but if you turn the news on, you're already in a state of stress, right? And then the work emails start pouring in, and there's always going to be stress in your life.
There's always going to be bad people that you're going to interact with, and there's going to be, like as you say, life is not a bed of roses here, and so as humans, we're made to deal with stressful situations.
I think we are. My take on it, and you know, it's an uninformed take from a scientific point of view, but it's quite informed from the process that I went through. Was we are made to handle stress and release it. And unfortunately in modern society, we've lost this, but it's not, you don't have to go too far back or to other cultures where this is still practiced. You know, the samurai would tremor before and after any battle, would spend hours in active tremoring to release the tension the energy that they intentionally mobilized to deal with that. There's cultures in the world who, when they lose a loved one, and their process of mourning is to cry. And when you cry, your diaphragm tremors. That's internally, your diaphragm is continually tremoring when you cry. And so another part of Western society is, if you're feeling like crying, you know, suck it up, wipe the tears away, you keep that in. Other cultures where, and I've seen it and I've done it myself, if you know, they'll be crying, and if you start to stop crying, they'll just fake it, continue to fake the cry until the next wave of emotion carries them into genuine crying. And they cry for a week, and they're in a part of their mourning process. They'll cry for a week, and that's the diaphragm releasing all of this, you know, this energy from having lost and the trauma or the stress of losing part of the family or a loved one. And so there are cultures, and there's many more examples I can list, and you'll see in some of the if anyone listening wants to follow this pathway, there are examples. Any of the guys, Gabor Mate is another excellent one who's worked with trauma and has joined the dots with the body. Peter Levine, Richard Scarr is another one whose books I've read, and some of them can be fairly heavy on the scientific point of view, but they're joining the dots with the body and can give many examples of cultures and mammals who this is just a completely natural thing to release the trauma or the tension that your body, or the energy that your body's mobilized to deal with a stressful situation. So I don't think this needs to, like, TRE for me is just one of the tools in many, is just to navigate life. And ironically, once you've tapped into this and allow your body to tremor, it becomes really easy. You don't need to do the 5 or 6 the 6 stretches. I can just lay down and tremor now. And you know, it's intentional, but you can just lay down and go through the sequence, and within about 3 minutes be tremoring. And there's another part that I would like to add in there is there's a muscle called the psoas muscle. They call it the muscle of the soul, PSOAS, psoas. It's the muscle that joins the bottom half of your body to the top half of your body, and it's almost impossible to get in touch with through massage or anything like that, because it sits underneath your organs and underneath other muscles. So you can't actually access it through some of the traditional ways. When I tremor, and when a lot of people who I've shown this technique to tremor, it's the psoas that starts the tremoring. So it sort of comes in the hips, mostly in the hips. And when you start looking into the psoas, it's definitely one of the main players in mobilizing energy, storing and releasing stress or trauma. So, and I ended up joining. I was listening to I think it was a Joe Rogan podcast with David Goggins, that's his name, ultra ex-Navy SEAL, ultra marathon guy who had this like hectic life, and he was talking about the psoas muscle, and he was basically thought he was dying, and started to stretch this psoas muscle, and within weeks, and there is a particular stretch that you can do to get at it. Within weeks, his life turned around. He was unable to get out of bed. And I'm not sure if he joined the trauma and the stress to that muscle, but that muscle was so tight and holding so much tension that it was essentially killing him. And again, I felt it in my back. When you've got tension and your muscles start contracting on the spine's like, and so that was a big part of my thing, was like this massive pain in my back and different parts of my body.
Isn't it interesting? A lot of people as they age complain about back pain and hip issues.
Yeah.
And so they try and fix it by surgery and various means. and so here we have this. It's an interesting explanation, because essentially it's the model being that the body hasn't learned to release that tension, and over the years it's just more and more is packed on.
Well, yeah, I've had a few people in my life who've said, oh, I'm going in for surgery on my back. I've got this bad back and they're going to fuse my discs. And I'm always going, well, be careful, because if you go to a surgeon, they only have one tool in the toolkit, and that's surgery. They don't have anything else. That they are a surgeon. That's what they do. And often people go to surgeons for advice, and the surgeon only understands a very narrow band of that, and sometimes surgery may be required. But there's a number of people who have actually listened to me, and I've said, well, what's going on in your life? And they start listing off their life, go, freaking hell, like you have got a lot going on, a lot of stress. No wonder your back's sore, and all your muscles are contracting, crushing your disc. So, I've got a bulging disc. Well, yeah, it's because your muscles are compressing your body, because it's holding onto this tension, ready to defend or fight or flee or whatever. And I've shown them TRE and some other tools, and I had 2 weeks of rest and had some stretches, and I'm fine. Like, yeah, well, the two, you're probably fine less from the stretches and more from just turning your mobile phone off for two weeks and having 2 weeks off work. That allowed you no new stress to come in, and your body to slowly unwind. But I think that back surgery stuff, I've had a number of friends who've I've just gone, maybe you're going to end up there, but before you go there, it just add it up in your head. Is stress, if stress causes tension, then tension and is muscular contraction, and no wonder you've got a bulging disc. You've got a lot of stress going on. So why don't you spend some time releasing some of that tension, and then see if you've still got a problem before you go and have surgery on it. So yeah, and I think
there are other places that are key to where the body stores stress, like the jawline or
yeah, well, I think one of the first things that happens when you get stressed is your breathing changes. So that's like a first protocol is this part of the stress response is to shorten your breath. And that often leads to this tension in the neck and the shoulders, because you've got a shallow shoulder breathing. And so that is one sort of area where you can pick it up if you're stressed, is your breathing is shallower and shorter and shallower. But I think the body and each person is probably different exactly how and whatever's going on in their life, how their body is storing it away. But ultimately what I've seen is when I talk to people, and they've got an autoimmune disease or, so when did that start? I think that started here. Okay, what happened before that? Oh, my dad passed away. Oh, right. And you know, or even cancer, you see, you know, a really traumatic, something happening traumatic in their life, and then, you know, 12 months later they've got cancer. And I just think, you know, a lot of, like you mentioned at the start of our chat, is that a lot of disease can come from stress and unreleased stress. I think stress is a great part of life. It's, you know, you can't grow without a bit of stress, without a bit of resistance, but we just lost the ability to release it in life. So TRE is just one of those tools. It's a tool that helped me. I think a lot of people would benefit from exploring and putting it into their life.
Can you find this information online of what these exercises are?
You can. You can do it yourself. I recommend going to somebody who knows what they're doing to do the first 1 or 2 times. And there's a list. If you go to, I'm pretty sure it's TRE Australia has got a list of practitioners. Richmond Heath has got some videos online. He's the guru in this space in Australia. I think he was a physiotherapist and spent a lot of time with trauma and stuff like that. He can articulate it better than I can. But he can put you in touch, or he runs workshops. It's how I learned about it. I recommend the first 1 or 2 times definitely doing it with somebody, because ultimately it's your nervous system releasing tension and coming down. I think the theory that some of this is based on a theory called polyvagal theory, which very simply is, you know, our stress responses are, you know, at the baseline, we're all good. When a stressor comes in, we first try to flee. If we can't flee, we go into a fight response, and everyone sort of knows fight or flight. If we can't flee, we go into a flight response. If we can't fight or flee, which is, you know, when you still need to turn up to your job that you hate at 9 a.m. every Monday, you know, you're not fleeing or fighting there. What you end up going into is a disassociation response. And so that, and what people don't, I suppose, what I realized out of this is depression can be the highest form of stress. It's where the nervous system is actually at its highest. It's on overdrive. But the protection mechanisms, and it's brilliant, the body has these amazing protection mechanisms that if we can't run and we can't flee, what we then do is disassociate. And that's why I was tripping over and dropping my keys and dropping glasses, because all the sensations from your extremities start to pull back, you know, and you hear of stories, I was in a fight and I got stabbed and I didn't feel it until 20 minutes later. And that's disassociation. It's protecting your ability to not have your hand bitten off by a lion and freak out and then get eaten. We're not going to feel the lion. You know, I'm sort of talking back in the day. If you have that analogy of, you know, we were cavemen and there was a lion and we had to fight because we couldn't run.
Yeah.
The body gives us this beautiful mechanism, which is disassociation. So we lose our hand, we can continue to fight and hopefully get ourselves out of that picture. And what I learned through this process is disassociation is a part of that stress response. But it's not a depressed system. Your system's actually on overdrive when you're depressed. And when you're in the disassociated state, your nervous system is at its highest function. And you can have a look at videos online on YouTube around this as well. Like, I'm sure most people have heard of a mouse playing dead. And when a cat gets a mouse plays dead. Well, it's not playing dead. It's a disassociation response where the body literally turns off the lights. You're still alive. Your heart rate's going, you're still alive. What is the final stage in, hey, if I can't run or I can't fight, I'm going to disassociate from my body, and hopefully there'll be a situation where that cat takes me to a hole and leaves me alone for 5 minutes where I can turn back on and escape. And what I've come to realize, and I'm not going to make a blanket claim about depression because I think there's probably numerous things, but depression, I believe, is a form of just enhanced disassociation where
you're actually just disconnected because your body's trying to, it's deploying one of its stress mechanisms, is to keep you safe, is to disassociate you from the body. And often depressed people say, oh, I can't feel anything, you know, and you can't feel anything because that's part of the response, is you disassociate. So and that was, again, like what I experienced with the reason I would trip over things, and was my feet were disassociated and I wasn't getting feedback. I was from up the body, from my feet, my hands was tripping over, my mouth, you know, these sorts of things were part of a bodily disassociation that I was experiencing. And it makes complete sense, you know. And so when you often start to release, if you're in that high state of nervous system activation, as you start to release it, you can start sort of coming back down the curve. And so you may experience going from a completely disassociated state back into I'm alive, but I want to fight or flee. Yeah. And so having somebody, you know, around you who can sort of see what's going on for you, and can say, yeah, you've just done some tremoring. This is probably why you're feeling anxious and like wanting to run or flee, is because you've been disassociated for 5 years, and now you're coming back into your body, and it's fine. You don't have to really, you know, but it's just a new feeling. You're becoming connected again. And so having a provider who you can tune in with maybe once every now and again. But the best thing about this technique is you can do it on your living room floor for free, watching TV with your family, if that's how you choose to do it, and you're not forking out, you know, $80 for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I think you know, we can't underestimate the value of human connection and human support. And I think when it comes to things like mental health issues, you know, the modality for medicine is trying to deal with it in terms of psychology, but as we were talking through this discussion here about it being in your body, and I find when I've had some mental health issues years back, I'd come out of it. It was a surgery, actually. And I'd come out and I felt like I wasn't myself. It was an emergency surgery for miscarriage, and I just felt so, as you were saying, disconnected from the rest of the world. So what I actually did was I just went back to basics of, you know, eating well, you know, the whole sort of routine of life. And then eventually that disassociation closed the gap. So I was thinking about how that disassociation, you know, I dealt with it in my body first. This is in my own experience. I was feeling disconnected from the world. I was like I was walking around in a dream state. This was after a surgery. And I think obviously, you know, various drugs had gone into my system and I was just feeling very lost. And I didn't know what to do. So I just dealt with what I was doing in my body first. And then over a period of months, I came back into my mind, my mental state. But how does one actually do and achieve that without a lot of support around you, you know, for people to say, to have that, either you have that mental strength yourself, or you have someone around you that says, hey, you know, you'll be fine. Everything's going to be okay. You might be in this depressed state now, but let's just do these things, whatever those things might be, whether it's TRS or to release that tension and to bring the body back into balance. And then you find that your mental state actually comes back together again.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of what I experience, is the body telling the mind constantly something's wrong, and then the mind going into overdrive to try and solve it. And I'm not saying that that's the experience of everybody. That was certainly my experience. And certainly from the research and the literature I've since reviewed and worked through to reconcile all of this experience, that's what the leading trauma science is saying, that it is body. It's the key to it is, and this is my belief as well, the key to trauma is in the body, is through the body, is going back in through the body, and it is counter to what what would you call it, the mainstream medical sort of model is. And I'm sure people can get results with psychology and all the rest of it, but I also know people who've been going to psychologists for years and
are no real better. It's sort of like a way to maybe maintain, keep yourself from completely dropping off the cliff, or the wheels falling off, so to speak. But you're not really healing. And I think, in my experience, the healing comes from the body going back through the body. And so, and like I said, I'm sure that there's other techniques out there. I know Bowen therapy, and there's other, even breath work, again, moving that diaphragm around, bringing you back, connected with the body. And ice baths are a big thing these days. And
yes.
back in the day, I spent some time with Wim Hof over in Spain, and his son. And this was prior to my little period of stress. But ice baths was one of the things I also employed, because when you jump in the ice, you go into your body.
I've done it. I've done an ice bath too. Yeah.
The ice forces you into your body. And so, what that technique does is it brings you into your body, and it's very hard to be thinking about what's going on at work, or what's going on tomorrow, or all the worries of the world when you're sitting in a ice bath up to your neck. You're basically, you are embodied. And so
we tend to spend a lot of time in our mind, I think, and we don't really feel our bodies so much. And when you're actually going into a meditation state or relaxation, you suddenly go, oh, I feel something. And obviously when you're sick and you've got those symptoms that you had, everything becomes heightened. Every little symptom that you have, every sound in your ear becomes quite is this going to be something? Is it going to turn into some disease state, or have I got cancer, or have I got a brain tumor?
It's part of the mind going to work, trying to solve the situation that the body's saying, hey, something's not right. The mind goes, oh, it's not right because my ear's ringing, and my ears are ringing because I've got brain tumor, and the mind starts to build this whole picture about it. And then I've experienced it. It's sort of not logical at all, but and I'm sure most people, when they've done the old Google doctor, they've experienced it. But what I found that it does is it's a negative feedback that just loads more stress into the system, and then keeps this wheel turning. So,
but isn't it interesting with children, though, that children naturally know how to bounce around, and especially boys, they're kind of always jumping off chairs and hanging upside down and doing all these sort of things. And yet, we put them into a school situation. Generally speaking, most kids go to school and are forced to sit into this chair and not really be in touch with their bodies, essentially being in touch with their minds for 6 hours of the day. So they're not. I think in a way, the educational system makes us lose touch with our natural instincts. Because when I look at, say, even my children who are homeschooled, especially the boys, they do a lot of these various shaking things when they've played too much computer games. And for initially, like before we've had this discussion, I was thinking, oh, is it not enough magnesium? Like is it and obviously they could probably play a lot less computer games, but
they're probably just better at listening to their body than what most adults are. Their body's saying, hey, I need to move right now because I've got a bit of energy that I've mobilized after that sort of that hectic computer game sequence. We've mobilized a bit of excitement and a bit of energy. Now I need to expel that. I see, the other thing, that we've lost out of society is dance. And I think dance is one of those things that when you see it in other cultures, and again, I sort of looked at this when I was working through things, is dance was one of those things that were culturally there, and people may not know exactly why, but everyone feels awesome after they've had a good dance, right? And even if you can, back when I was a bit younger, and you go out and have a good dance, you'd always feel pretty good. And it's just, I think it's part of that. And often when you're properly dancing, and I think people really let go of their mind, and I'm not sure why I'm moving my arm that way or whatever. It's just
the music and everything.
I'm responding to it, and that's the body's wisdom going, oh, I want to move my arm that way, and the mind's not in the way saying, no, we don't dance like that. You're just dancing. So I think that's just another one of the body-based things that naturally people want to do. The body, like you look at the kids, my kids are the same. Naturally, they want to dance. When they hear music, they dance.
Yes.
So you know, that's just a part of the body's mechanisms. I think that today we've lost a bit of touch of in connection with. So
I mean, it'd be great to bring all these things back, you know, in some way and form. I mean, I think I was talking to someone the other week in terms of workplaces. How do we make workplaces healthier by bringing this knowledge back? I mean, it's
100%.
through your lessons you can actually. I mean, in an ideal world, like you've obviously thought about this a lot. What would you love to see? You know, how would you love to see change in terms of how we deal with this?
Look, I just don't think there's a blanket rule. I mean, the blanket rule is get connected with your body.
Yeah.
And how you do that, whether it is dance, whether it's TRE, whether it's you know, going for a massage or bone therapy or any of that, is if you're connected with your body, then you'll having some tools in there. And for me, I find TREs just, I feel like so many people should know about it. It's part of why when I seen your LinkedIn post, I was like, I should reach out to Jeannie and see if this would be of interest, because it's just a very natural thing is for us, our bodies to shake, and we just don't do it anymore. And I think so many of us are carrying stress. So many of us, I mean, trauma is just a part of life. Like there is no way you can get through life without experiencing some level of trauma or a stressful event.
I mean, we're all going to see grief at some point,
right? We're all going to see grief.
Lose someone that we love.
Exactly right. And we just don't have the tools for it. And I think, TRE, it can be one of the tools that people can have in their toolkit if they knew about it. And unfortunately for TRE, barely anybody I speak to has ever heard of it. And the other thing is, it is so simple and what I believe so effective. And often I hear so many people talk about PTSD and have almost this, it feels like this diagnosis of,
yes,
you know, like doom. It's a diagnosis of doom.
Once they put a label on it, you know.
Exactly right. And like, I don't think the label really helps. Like, I think, you know, obviously the labels are just to describe a collection of symptoms. And ultimately, what I've come to believe PTSD is just in my experience, there's probably a whole gamut there, but it's just stored stress, trapped stress, unreleased stress, and it can accumulate. And often with PTSD, it's something drastic that happens, often a life-threatening event or something that's perceived as life-threatening. And in those situations is what I believe is where the body mobilizes this enormous amount of energy to deal with that life-threatening event. Like, you know, our body is under a do or die sort of situation. It can pull energy from anywhere, and it's that energy that if it's not released is what goes on to cause these sort of heightened stress responses that are labeled PTSD. But ultimately, it's just trapped stress. And unfortunately, since I learned about this, I've told many people about these tools, and so often I see this pattern. Something significantly stressful has happened in somebody's life. They haven't felt the same. They get sick, and it's often they don't join the dots of my autoimmune disease is linked to somehow this trauma that happened, or this state, and then ultimately what sometimes can stop people from healing is becoming somehow attached to this identity of I have a mental health issue, or I have autoimmune disorder, and that's sort of part of my identity now, and that's also unhelpful, because I think ultimately we're built to thrive, and and what I've experienced with TRE, it can be really quite simple and quite quick to unwind some of that stress, which then can allow the body to start to heal.
And I was going to add that stress, we tend to overlay stress as something mental, right? But I was thinking about, you know, my baby who was, I think he was about 20 months old when he had his febrile convulsions. And obviously he didn't have any stressful situations, but what he did have was he had some sort of infection that made him have this fever. So he was obviously carrying up enough stress in his body that manifested in a convulsion.
Yeah, I mean, the
and
body
so
was
there
under
could
the
be
body was
all-
under stress. The
there could be
body,
all
his
sorts
body
of-
was definitely under stress with that infection, or that, you know, he mentally might not have been stressing about his infection, but his body was in a state of stress, no doubt.
Yeah, and when you actually think about, say, even some injuries that people have had sustained from these injections, and you see them convulsing, you know, and shaking a lot, and that this is actually, and what medicine is trying to do is stop that process. But when what you're actually saying here, I mean, what this research is saying is that this is actually a natural release. This is it's a way the body is trying to heal. What we're looking at in terms of symptoms of disease is actually a process where the body is trying to restore balance in itself. And eventually, obviously the injury is significant. Then there's a lot of, you know, shaking and tremoring. But otherwise, you know.
I mean, I'm not I'm not sure about, you know, where tremors are sort of induced from a toxin or sort of other stuff. But in my experience with stress and with trauma, it's to not be scared or worried about the tremors. The tremors are very natural. And, you know, that might be applied to other situations where people are tremoring as well. It feels to me like definitely part of the body's innate way of healing. But I've seen it. I've sat with people who I've walked through the TRE with and watched them tremor. And yeah, my nervous system, what happens when you're in a group setting doing this, or then there's a few people tremoring, you start to tremor when you see other people tremor, and you know, that starts to open up questions as well around, well, how are our nervous systems all connected? Because I'm sitting here watching somebody else tremor and their stuff, and I've had some experiences where, you know, some people I've taught who are carrying quite a lot of trauma, you know, smoke alarms and things start going off in the room when they start to tremor, and it's like, you know.
Wow.
I don't know how to put it together, but it's like, well, it starts to make you go, well, if you're releasing energy and this sort of energy is coming out, and I can feel it, and you know, that's the energy that your body mobilized to deal with all the stress or the trauma, and you know, the other sort of thing for me is like, it should be a gentle process. You know, you might have taken years or decades to build up this level of stress. You know, don't try and let it all go in one hit. Unwind it gradually, and you know, let a bit go, see how you feel the next day. Let a bit go let a bit more go, see how you feel. And your body might get sore. I've had, you know, one young guy I was sort of helping through some trauma. Each time he tremored, his body got quite sore for a day or two after. I've not seen it elsewhere, but I was like, if you've been walking around your whole life like for years like this, and you're suddenly going, oh, you know, your muscles are like, I can relax for a moment. You know, you might feel a little bit less tense, and that's something that you're not used to feeling. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really valuable to explore for anybody. You know, we're all stressed, for anybody to explore, but certainly those who have had trauma in their life and are not thriving or not feeling well, definitely have a look at it anyway. And you need to do a little bit of digging, but you can find stuff on YouTube and online where you can actually see people tremoring. You know, sort of war veterans experiencing it. The US Marines, I think, used it. One of the AFL clubs in Victoria were using it for a while as part of their recovery process. It's very natural, and as I said, once you've done it once or twice, you actually become super. Like, it feels very natural, very relaxing to tremor. It just, you just got to let go of the mind.
It's really like what you're giving us here today is this people can take it or they can leave it, but it's the idea that to embrace it. And I think when you've got that, then you're not scared. You know, like I think that's the whole thing when you're trying a new modality is people are like, oh, a bit worried that like, and let's say you're tremoring uncontrollably just for no reason, like you don't understand this, like then you might think, oh, there's something wrong with you, let's go get something fixed. But if you actually see it as a natural process and actually embrace it, then how good is that? So that if you're grieving and you're just like heaving, you know, and moving, and you just know that this is what you're meant to do, where society is kind of like trying to contain us all the time and say, no, just hold it all in, you'll be fine. But they don't have this way of releasing it all. Like I'm pretty sure that in some cultures they do a bit of dancing and they, you know, and all sorts of, you know, street stuff when people are grieving.
Well, I know the Maori culture when they've lost a loved one, it's a full process of grieving. Like there's actually, you know, there's days or even maybe a week or something like that where there's a process of working through the grief, letting it go. And I know India
wailing and
wailing, and I know in India they do a lot of wailing, and that's part of that diaphragm shaking, releasing the energy. You know, and I think that there's many more examples that we could find, but it's a very natural thing. But like you were touching on, and this is sort of why I say, you know, the first one or two times, I mean, you could probably look it up on YouTube and have a crack yourself, but the first couple of times I did it, I was with people who knew what they were doing, who showed me the technique. And often what I've found is your nervous system is reading the room. And so if I'm in a state of, I'm not real sure what my body's doing here, but all the nervous systems around me are very calm, then I can find a state of calm. And so if you're doing it next to your partner who doesn't have a clue what's going on and starts to freak out when you're like shaking on the floor, not fitting, but when you're tremoring on the floor, and their nervous system starts to panic, and then your nervous system's reading the room and just going, well, hang on a second, there's panic. What's going on? Just the first couple of times I do, and you can do it over Zoom. I know Richmond in Victoria does it over Zoom, and some of the other providers do it over Zoom. And so, you know, it is accessible. TRE Australia, I'm pretty sure the website is. Do it the first couple of times with somebody. They can talk you through it. And that way, when you're doing it on your own at night time and you're watching a bit of TV, you can be just completely comfortable and enjoy it and not be sort of going, oh, why is my foot now?
And of course, once you learn it, you're like you, Matt, that shared it with so many people, and you're being able to be there present for those people.
Yeah, exactly right.
So it's almost a gift that keeps on giving, really. It's a skill.
100%, yeah. And again, you know, partly why I reached out to say, look, it's my wife's been encouraging me to try and share it wider, because so many people are in, you know, so there's always people in our circle of friends going, something's going on in their life and they're not real well, and like, have you tried TRE? No, what's that? All right, come over for some dinner and we'll show you. And so
how amazing.
Yeah, so I think there's an opportunity. Not sure who will hear this on your channels, but something that there are people out there who, you know, I don't train this at all. It's just something that I've learned. But there are people out there, physiotherapists and chiropractors and stuff, who have gone and you know, done the training to share this with others. And I just, you know, recommend going and having a chat with those guys, doing a Zoom call or going to one of the workshops. But definitely just explore it if you're feeling that trauma or stress or any of that's played a role in where you're at.
Well, it doesn't even matter. I think even if anyone who has some form of chronic illness, they may not, I mean, there's no harm for them to just give it a go, right? No. And you never know what else is released downstream from releasing that stress.
I think it's quite...
The investment seems quite small in terms of what potential benefits that someone is going to get from that. And if they resonate with it, I think, you know, when everyone's on their healing journey, we're always a different place. And it all starts with the seed. And I think this is the beauty, I guess, of the internet that they're trying to kind of take away from us, is that you have this, the seed that you've planted today, it goes out to various people and you just don't even know where that ends, where, how did you acquire that information? Was through someone,
someone on a blog post in the US.
Yeah, someone on a blog post in the US. And here, this will be the same thing. And you're sort of essentially, paying it forward to whoever goes downstream. And one day it'll probably be quite mainstream. Like,
yeah,
this is what I found. So. I was in organics for the last, 20 something years. And when I first heard about organics, I had to explain to people what organic food was in the street. No one knew, but now it's all very, very mainstream. And the same things with a lot of the things that, I couldn't even believe it on Tucker Carlson the other day, talking about fluoride in toothpastes in the water and how they don't use it anymore. And I was thinking, wow, it's taken, 20 something years, but it's become more and more mainstream. And I feel like this digital age of us being able to share like this has been accelerated to such a degree that people are able to connect with each other, share this information of how certain things have changed their life. And essentially, it doesn't even get passed on just digitally. Like when you look at yourself, you've acquired the information online through another source, but then you brought it into all these people within your network. And where have all those people taken it from their network to other people as well?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's one of the unfortunate things about the modern day with our health is that I see it so often, people just sort of outsourcing their health to the doctor. It's like, when it comes to my health, that's not my problem. I go and see the doctor and the doctor tells me what to do. I think that's just this, it's quite I think it's the wrong mindset to have. I mean, doctors can potentially play a role in helping you to heal and manage symptoms and whatever else, but ultimately your health should be your own responsibility. And unfortunately, a lot of people are devoid of any knowledge around that. And it's a process of, like you say, sharing this information and others to help people find the knowledge that they need to heal. And then take control of their own healing. Certainly, like I had one of the discussions I remember with my doctor was, well, Matty, we're not sure what's going on. We can prescribe you anti-anxiety medications, and I'm like, what the hell? I told you, I'm like, not one, I'm not interested in Band-Aids, and two, I don't really feel anxious. So why would you give me this? Yeah. I've got these. They're like, well, we think it might be something to do with stress. They were sort of touching on where the problem was, but the only tool they had was not to heal; it was just to manage the symptoms. So, and I was not interested in managing symptoms. I was fine, and then I wasn't, and I was only interested in getting back to being fine again. And like I said, ironically, once I sort of found the right tool, it was a very reasonably fast and quick process to get back from where I 5:30 every morning in the pool. Otherwise I was on shaky ground with headaches and all the rest of it. Remember there was times there, and I think this is part of this insidious part of stress and traumatic stress is the mind is looking for the problem. And there was times when I'd like get a photo with my son, and then I'd go, there was this sort of like a background noise of, oh, well, at least he'll have that when I die, this photo to remember me by. And it was like not a logical thing. Like there was no logical process in that, but it's this constant mind constantly going, something's wrong. And so I can see now, like I say, I empathize a lot with people who are in these situations because I've experienced it, and I've experienced how strong it can be. And there's also nothing, what I've learned is there's nothing wrong with you. It's a very natural process for your body to mobilize that energy to work with stress. There's just this missing part on the end of where we let it go, where we release it. And unfortunately, we've lost that last part, which just means that, it just continues to build up to a point where it starts affecting our
you
health.
could have just taken those anti-anxiety drugs and just stayed in this condition and accepted the symptoms like a lot of people might have done. So it's the fact that you've, you know, pushed on to find that answer that's also not just helped you, but I think it's a real testimony to other people of, you know, the journey that you've been on. If you, I mean, like, it's a whole year of having these symptoms that are so serious that they thought you had a brain tumor, to come out the other side and being able to essentially fix yourself in the matter of weeks. I mean, it's a powerful testimony.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels a while ago now, and I sort of struggle to maybe put myself back into that situation. But I do know when I was in there, it was a pretty dark, you know, it was a pretty dark situation where I literally thought I was dying. So, and like you say, I like, thankfully I had the sort of tenacity to continue to look for answers. But, you know, and I was in a situation financially and had the time and energy to do so. Many people, unfortunately, either don't have the resources, or, you know, I have a science degree, so I was able to, I was able to research and read literature, and others are not, you know, maybe not in that position. And again, trusting, well, my health is the doctor's responsibility. So if the doctor says so, then that must be it. So I was sort of, you know, grateful that I had the foundation, which allowed me to persist until I found a solution. And then, yeah, now be able to share that with others, certainly in my within my circles, but, you know, having this opportunity to share the story. And I think, like you say, the testimony, it is when I sort of verbalize it like this in a conversation, it can be a powerful testimony, because I'm sure there'll be people who are resonating with, well, I suffer migraines really bad, and you know, I had this, and start joining the dots with their own lives where, like I said, stress and trauma is unavoidable in life. And so people can hopefully start joining the dots with maybe where some of their health symptoms or things started to emerge after a traumatic or a particular stressful.
Instead of putting a label on it, you called it that. So anyway, we should wind up because I know you have to go. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Matt, for your time today, for coming and watching. Please remember to subscribe, comment, share, distribute this information widely. You never know who else you can help. healthallianceaustralia.org has a mailing list if you would like to stay in touch. You can find Health Alliance Australia, Matt and myself on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenny.
Great.